Zero. All right, the polls influence the news validates the polls, and then the PACs run out and raise money off the polls that are validated by the news. Somebody who has been on the other side of this and heavily involved joins us right now, Mark Pischea. He's a GOP pollster, former deputy director of the National Republican Congressional Committee. And Mark, thank you for joining me. I'm joined today, luckily, by a guest in studio. Former Congressman Vito Fossella is with us, so he knows a little bit about your world also. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Exciting to be here.
It's a pleasure. So, Mark, you're a GOP pollster. You're also part of the NRCC. What do you make about how off these polls were again for the second cycle in a row?
You know, in a phrase, garbage in, garbage out. Part of the problem with polling is that it's based on a predictive model of what turnout is going to look like. And the sample is stratified across a state, a region, country, based on where turnout is expected to perform and at what previous historic levels. In an election like 2020, where turnout was completely upside down between early voting, mail-in voting, partisan differences in how they voted, whether it's AV or election day, the surge voting that happened in rural America, question marks about turnout in African American communities and minority communities. This was a really tough election to predict from a turnout perspective, and so it's not surprising that a lot of these polls were significantly off.
Hey, Mark, it's Vito Fossella. Thanks for joining us here. So I think John and I, maybe if we were on a different page, that's fine. Polling's not going away, right? It is going to be with us. It takes on different forms. You live it. That's your profession. I've interacted with them over the years, and there's nothing against polling per se. I think it becomes a little different when the media complex or the media apparatus just starts using polls to create narratives that often turn out to be not true. So let me rephrase that. If I'm running for office and I want to hire you as my pollster, that's a decision that I make between me and you. I then take the numbers that you run, we sit down, we discuss it, what's our goal, what's our aim, and then we run the numbers and we say, okay, based on these numbers, where are we going to go? And it's still a subjective assessment of, are we right, are we wrong, are we dead, whatever the case may be. That's different than saying every day we're besieged with these national polls to say, okay, Biden's going to win. He can't lose. And it's never going to be close. And therefore we go to, as John said, the PACs and others. I'm just curious, do you have a judgment or an opinion on that aspect of polling and its implications?
Well, there's at least two reasons for doing a poll. I mean, we're fixated on what the media, is reporting and how that could potentially skew an election, particularly when those results are wrong. But the other reason polls are used is by campaigns, as former congressman, internally to drive your own strategic decision making, what message you use, what audience you target, what message you target to that audience. That will continue to be a tool in the toolbox for campaigns. And as long as that's true, the media is going to want to know the same data that these campaigns know, and for entirely different reasons. So, I think we're seeing a huge shift in just election coverage, right? I mean, I'm old enough that I remember when election night coverage was to inform, not to lure you in and keep you for 24 hours. It was to inform and let you go on with your day. That's not the intention of today's news media. The intention of today's media is ratings, and what drives ratings? Conflict,
division.
Exactly. So I think as long as we have a media that's fixated on ratings and profits, we're going to have to deal with that kind of misreporting at times.
I agree with you, Mark. Well put.
Hey, Mark, I want to ask you something on polling and messaging. The big bad wolf story of the left is this evil Republican Party doesn't care about the environment, doesn't care about our air, doesn't care about clean water, because that's part of this narrative. But there's actually signs of clever, young, innovative legislators at different state levels who want to bring technology and thought into paying attention to something that matters to all Americans, clean air and clean water. Do you think even on that front, Republicans are cast in a bad light by them saying, "Hey, these are the green people and these are the not green people"?
Yeah, and I think that that's kind of what's devolved in the energy debate in America today, that it's a zero-sum game. It's this way, the Green New Deal, or this way, which is just completely let the Wild West take over. The reality is good policy happens in between those extremes. And, the problem we've had as Republicans, as conservatives, is that we've not been at the table to help determine what that policy looks like. So when we don't like it, when it's based on mandates and subsidies and picking winners and losers, bad on us, for not being there. We've got no reason to complain. Rather, as you say, we all care about clean air, clean water. To win future elections, it's going to be important that Republican candidates have a narrative on this. It's been difficult under a Trump administration when finding opportunity in the energy space has been challenging because of his positions. But I believe that going forward, Republicans will have much to contribute here. And ultimately, to the extent that we are dealing with clean energy transitions and perhaps even climate as a community, it's going to be a bipartisan approach, but it's not going to be based on growing government and adding regulation and the federal government taking over. As conservatives, we need to approach that policy in a way that leverages markets, ensures state and local sovereignty over policy, and doesn't add lots and lots of government spending and bureaucracy that will undermine any kind of opportunity for growth.
So I would just add, yeah, and it's all well put, Mark, and I agree with a good chunk of that, if not all of it. The one extension of that is, it seems that what people want, or the media, whoever is gauging or trying to drive public opinion, is this notion that you're either for the environment or you're against the environment. You're either for this or you're for that, and there is no in between, which I found to be just intellectually dishonest and just wrong, as opposed to, what's the issue? Ask the question, and then let's start to implement policies. And I think that too often there are groups that raise a lot of money off of being critical of those who don't agree with their side 100%. So therefore they're labeled as that person is against the environment, as if anybody is against the environment. Anybody is against clean water. So how do we bridge that? I know you want to have a seat at the table, but how do we deal with that? You're either for it, or you're either with me or against me.
Well, I think we're seeing that not just in the energy space, but in a lot of policy areas, right? Where there's no value in compromise, there's no value in middle ground when the extremes of each party are driving the agenda. That's problematic. I think you look at the election results from this week, at least those we know, the presidential race, not surprisingly, really came down to more about personality than policy. And we're seeing the results of that play out before us. But if you look below that on the ballot, whether it's the U.S. Senate or Congress, where Republicans picked up 5 seats, and if Republicans do lose the White House, it'll be only the second time in history where a party in power lost the White House but gained seats in Congress. What that tells me, and then if you look the story similar at the state house level, where this blue wave was expected to flip legislative districts all over the country, it didn't happen. In fact, the opposite happened. Republicans gained legislative chambers in New Hampshire, held on to every battleground legislative caucus fight in the country. And so what that's telling me is that Republican principles, Republican positions are still popular, still are, more appealing than what's coming out of the left. But they didn't like, particularly look at suburban women, which were, a high focus of this campaign. I sat in a number of focus groups where the conclusion was among these women that we don't disagree with what he's saying. We just really don't like the way he's saying it.
Right.
And so I think what you're seeing is down ballot, when personality's taken out and candidates are evaluated on the issues, we performed really well this week, far in excess of what the media was predicting.
Absolutely. All right, Mark, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. We got to have you back soon. I'm sure we'll have a lot to talk about coming up, but thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much. Enjoy your day.
Take care, Mark.
Very
Thanks.
good. All right, we're going to take a quick break here. Just for those of you who missed it, Vito did say I'm a winner in his book 2 segments ago.
It's a small book.
Hold on to and cherish. Quick break, back after.
It's a small book.